Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new fundamental analysis of Teqnion AB.
Yes, good to be here again with you.
Yeah, excited to be back. Today we're talking about a Swedish serial acquirer. It's going to be exciting. I'm going to probably learn a lot of new things. I'm currently not invested in Teqnion. I'm very excited for today's audio analysis.
Yeah, for full disclosure, I am. So I'm curious what you have to say about the Teqnion.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting. And this is why I love doing what we do, analyzing businesses for a living. And with our investment research, we get to analyze 52 different businesses every single year, talk about the different industries, sectors. You learn so much, and that's why I love what we do right now.
Yes, I totally agree. Before we started this company, I was always thinking I would like to analyze more businesses, get to know more companies. Or when I wasn't doing that, I was thinking, maybe there are better opportunities. I only see so little stocks. And now that we started the company together with Bauke and Matthijs, so we are with the four of us, we are able to analyze so much more businesses. And
yeah, that's the strength of the Dutch investors. I mean, if you're alone, you have to turn around so many different rocks to find maybe one gem. And because we get to analyze 52 different businesses every single year, that's a new business every week, we can just turn around so many stones and find, the goal is to find more gems than you can if you're alone.
And just to be clear, you don't analyze 52 companies a year just by yourself. Yeah, the four of us all analyze 13 companies a year. So together with the four of us, we analyze 52 businesses a year.
Our database is going to grow so much with so many cool businesses to learn from, and
really look forward to do all these audio analysis with you, Asim.
You are?
Yeah, only when your camera is off.
I'll turn it off then. Hey, before we get off track, let's get started with today's fundamental analysis, which is Teqnion AB. I believe it's a Swedish serial acquirer. Luc, please tell us a little bit about what is Teqnion and what do they do?
Yeah, well, you said it right. They are a serial acquirer based in Sweden, and most of the companies are also located in Sweden, but they also expanded into the UK. Currently, it's September 2024, and the market cap is 3.3 billion Swedish kroner. But in dollars, that is 330 million. So quite a small company.
Yeah, that is a small company. And I believe, if I did my facts check correctly, less than 500 employees. So it's still is it a small cap or a micro cap? What would you say?
Yeah, what's the difference? I would go for a small cap.
Small cap, okay. And just for the listeners who don't know, can you please elaborate a little bit on a serial acquirer? What do they do? Why are they different from a regular business?
Yeah, a serial acquirer, in my definition, is basically a company whose core business it is to acquire companies.
Okay, so a well-known statistic tells us that most acquisitions fail, but there's a difference in serial acquirers. Am I right?
Yes, you're right. Because it's the core business, the succeed rate is a lot higher. That does not mean that every acquisition is successful, but when you have the right principles in place, follow certain rules, have a good culture. Management is very important because they have to choose the acquisitions and make sure they are integrated well. Then the success rate of a acquisition is so much higher, and it can be your core business and a very lucrative one.
All right, yeah. As we can tell from several well-known serial acquirer companies such as Constellation Software, Topicus, even Teqnion, they've done very well. And the thing is with serial acquirers, over time they tend to get better. if you don't acquire a lot of companies, you don't really know how to integrate them. Perhaps you overpay for them. You don't know if they give you an additional benefit once you integrate them. And if you just focus solely on acquiring new companies, integrating them, perhaps even leaving them alone, like Berkshire Hathaway did over time, just leaving the culture, leaving the business as it is, leaving the management intact, it can work out very, very well over time.
Yes, that's one of the most important aspects, a decentralized management structure. And do you know what's also very interesting?
Tell me.
Well, a serial acquirer, take for example Teqnion, the PE ratio is 30 right now. So they collect money from investors for 30 times the profit. But what Teqnion themselves do with that money is they acquire new businesses for only 5 times the profit. So there's so much leverage on their side, and that's what makes Teqnion and also a lot of other serial acquirers so attractive.
All right, very interesting. Hey, let's get started. Please take us to the history of Teqnion.
Yes, Teqnion doesn't have a big history. It's a particularly young company. It was founded in 2006 by John Steen, who is still the CEO of Teqnion, and 2 partners of him who stepped out. The first couple of years were really challenging. Only 2 years into the company, the financial crisis hit. Teqnion had to be saved because the finances weren't all right. And that's what led to the change in direction. So that is when the principles came in place and John Steen started off his quest to acquire multiple businesses, which led to the IPO of Teqnion in 2017. When in 2020, Daniel Zhang joined Teqnion and became the chief acquisition officer. So basically, he and John Steen do all the acquisitions together. They select potential targets. They have the conversations with the management teams that will probably be taken over. So he seems like a great addition to the management team. And in 2022, the first non-Swedish acquisition took place of Bell Coachworks.
Is this like a strategy they're tapping into right now, international expansion, or is it just like tapping the water, seeing if there's opportunities outside of Sweden?
Well, not just anywhere international. Their main focus is on Sweden and the UK.
All right. I think it's, well, there's not much to tell other than that on Teqnion's history, I suppose, in this short time period. How about we go over the business model of Teqnion? All right, so I assume you're a serial acquirer, you buy new companies, and that's it. Can you tell us a little bit about how they make money? Is it that simple, or?
Well, it's not that simple. There are a lot of differences also between the serial acquirers. What Teqnion does is they focus mainly on business-to-business companies that operate within a niche market, and that has a reliable and trustworthy management team, and that is easy to understand. And very important, they are mostly industrial companies. We'll get into the companies which are under the umbrella of Teqnion, but to have a reference, it are very simple companies like the magnets between the doors which trigger the fire alarms, or a company that builds food trucks. Some defense companies. And preferably Teqnion acquires the market leader or the second player in the market, so companies that already have a stable market share.
Yeah, and if you go over on Teqnion's investor relations, you can find some of the businesses they operate in, they own. For example, they have a company called Air Target, which makes supersonic projectiles, that sounds cool. They own a company called Avalair, which designs and manufactures air compressors, very different. They just acquired a company in the UK, you told us about, Bell Coachworks, which designs it designs basically enclosed vehicles and transports very expensive cars in very cheap looking trucks.
Yes, this is quite genius. That where you have a special Ferrari or a Maserati, for example. Of course, you're not gonna showcase it in the truck like, "Hey, this is my Ferrari. let's see, let's see who can get it." No, it's very smart or logical to transport that in a very ugly truck, so the transportation is more safe.
Yeah, and they even have a business you use on a daily basis.
And which one is that?
The EloFlex, the electric wheelchairs.
Yeah, Sim doesn't see me right now, so he thinks I'm disabled. But I will try to walk.
Well, sorry for anyone listening that is, but I mean, sometimes a joke.
You have a dark sense of humor sometimes.
I do sometimes, yeah. Sorry. Before we get off track again, can you please elaborate a bit more on the business model?
Was that a joke off track with the wheelchair?
Exactly.
Please repeat yourself.
Can you elaborate on the business model a little bit more?
Yeah, some extra information about the business they want to acquire. They ideally have a revenue between 2 and 15 million. And Teqnion always looks to make their investment back within 5 years. So this does not mean that the business has to grow 15% a year, but they want their money back in 5 years. So this growth does not have to be linear, but ideally, the average growth is 50% a year.
All right. So since it's a serial acquirer, can you tell us a little bit about how many companies they acquire on average a year?
Yes, it differs, of course, but on average is 4 a year.
Okay. And what model does Teqnion use once they acquire a company?
Well, like we already said in the intro, a decentralized model is very important. It's important for the companies that have been taken over to keep that sense of ownership. When they feel like they are the owners, they are still motivated. The only difference is that they maybe don't have to worry about going under, or that if Teqnion can assist them with cash input. But the philosophy is that the companies that have been taken over remain independent, even though they are not.
Yeah, and Teqnion provides the capital, extra capital if needed. Teqnion also has no exit strategy, so once they purchase or a company, they are in it for the long term, as they tell you in the letters and annual reports. And with the Teqnion group, they offer continuous development of both the business and the individuals behind the subsidiaries.
Yes, they support the managers of their subsidiaries. And what you mentioned, that Teqnion doesn't have an exit strategy, that is very important, because when you imagine the revenue of these companies is between 2 and 15 million. Of course, it's a lot of money, but for a company, it's not. They are quite small companies. And they operate, and often they are located within smaller villages or towns. And the CEOs that get taken over, they employ people from that towns. They know those people personally. They probably also know their families. So when a founder wants to sell their company and they sell it to private equity, the company gets stripped down. A lot of people are fired often, and that does not weigh good on the reputation of that owner. So that's an advantage that Teqnion has. They do not pay the best price, but they do have a guarantee that the company will not be stripped down.
All right, thank you very much. And once we look at the competition, can you identify a few companies that are similar or they are competing with?
Yeah, it's more looking at similar companies because, of course, every company has different competitors. So I looked at a couple of serial acquirers, also from Sweden. Then you have Livco. Compared to Teqnion, Livco is huge. They have a market cap of $11 billion. They specialize in dental practices, construction, and also a couple of IT companies. And on average, they do 15 acquisitions per year, so a lot more than Teqnion with their 4. Yeah, then you have VTech Software. They specialize in niche software. Also, almost 5 times as big as Teqnion is. They do about 5 acquisitions per year. And then you have a company called Lagerkrans Group, and they specialize in electrification and controlling systems. They are about 10 times as big as Teqnion is, and they also do twice as many acquisitions per year.
So do you count Constellation Software or Topicus as competition as well, or not?
No, they are more specialized in acquiring IT companies, and well, Teqnion is more specialized in industrial companies. So there's an important difference.
Yeah, so there's a distinction between just serial acquirers and the niche they operate in.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So what else can you tell us about the competition that it's important to note?
Well, what's interesting is that Teqnion currently has the highest return on invested capital of all of them. But this might not be a big surprise because Teqnion is also the smallest one of them. So they have the most to prove, also the longest growth way ahead. But on the other hand, yeah, exactly like I said, Teqnion still has to prove themselves to become that big. So there's more potential, but also way more risk. And when we look at the past 3 years, Teqnion was able to reinvest 130% of their free cash flow. So that is quite a lot. You want this percentage to be above 100. So they can effectively put cash flows to work. And also when you compare the revenue from Teqnion to the competitors, Teqnion grows a lot faster than the competitors. This is also because of their smaller scale.
Is there any bad news to tell us?
Yes, until now it has been only positive, but there are some things to worry about. Like you said, Teqnion does not have an exit strategy. So they also own a couple companies that cause a lot of problems. They own 2 Swedish construction companies, which are suffering quite hard. That market is really getting beaten up, mainly because of the rising interest rates and higher inflation. So they have 2 construction companies that are suffering and a furniture company that's also not performing well. These make up about 8% of their book value. And this is one of the reasons, according to the management team, that Teqnion had a decrease in growth the past year. But to be honest, Seem, management states this as the main reason for their problems. But I think it's not all due to these companies. I think they just underperformed and they have to. I think there's a little bit more going on than just blaming these 3 companies as the scapegoat.
Yeah, well said, I think. Anything you want to add there before we head over to the competitive advantage of Teqnion?
No, let's move into the competitive advantage.
All right. Tell us, what does a moat of a serial acquirer look like and how does it work?
Well, this is one of the hardest questions to answer for a serial acquirer because there's not a typical moat you can just put on a serial acquirer. The moat basically exists within the companies they own. It's not easy to measure that, but every business is different, and together these businesses will have a moat. At least I hope so for Teqnion.
Yeah, building a moat as a serial acquirer seems difficult, I guess. Once you become quite large as a constellation software, you get a few advantages such as economies of scale, and but still,
Yeah, even that is difficult because the economies of scale, these businesses you own all operate independently from each other. So you could centralize some administrative tasks, but still this would not give you a big advantage with economies of scale.
All right, interesting. Anything else important we should know about the competitive advantage?
Yeah, one thing to note is that Teqnion mostly acquires boring companies that no one wants to own, and that's not entirely true, but they are often so simple and so boring that there is not a lot of competition to start a new company. Like right now, I'm sure there are thousands of AI companies that all want to be the biggest in the world, but there are not a thousand entrepreneurs trying to manufacture food trucks or trying to manufacture little magnets that will ensure the fire alarm goes off.
Or your electric wheelchair, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like unattractive industries. Is that one of the reasons Teqnion is able to purchase them for a much lower valuation as well? Or how come Teqnion can acquire a company for a PE of, let's say, 5, while the market has an average PE of, let's say, 20?
Well, first of all, because those businesses are not publicly traded, I think it also helps that these are relatively small companies. So there's also not a lot of competition to acquire them. And it's really a emotional reason because Teqnion offers them a place to leave the companies in good hands, and private equity definitely pays more, but they don't have that insurance. So the decisions that are being made by the acquired companies are emotional reasons play a part in that decision.
All right. And just for my understanding, does Teqnion go to companies, or do companies also come to Teqnion?
Both ways. They had this question in the Q&A they give, but they look for companies themselves, but sometimes they also get contacted. And what they often say is the process of acquiring can sometimes take up to 5 years, 6 years. Sometimes it goes really fast, but it could also be the case that it's just someone within their network who's just waiting to retire and then reaches out to Teqnion.
There's a lot of useful information to get through. Let's head over to the management team. You just told us that for a serial acquirer, the management team is incredibly important. Can you tell us a little bit about why that is, and what does the management team look like for Teqnion?
Well, the success of Teqnion depends on how capital is allocated. And what is the main task of the management team?
Making electric wheelchairs.
For me.
Capital allocation, obviously.
Yes, the decisions that are made here are very important for the success. So management has to decide which companies to acquire. They have to lay out the strategy. They have to allocate their resources, also time-wise, smart, so that all these different companies are performing as well as they can, as best as possible. And it's kind of a business where trust and reliance is very important.
Isn't that in every company?
Yes, definitely. But with a lot of companies, you can kind of hide behind your brand. For example, the CEO of Coca-Cola could be an asshole, but when you view the marketing of Coca-Cola, it's all happy faces. Everyone is happy and consumers will still buy Coca-Cola. But if the management team of Teqnion is not trustworthy, not nice, no one will sell their company to them.
There is a book called The Outsiders about special characteristics of the best CEOs out there. I believe Johan Steen could be one of them. Perhaps you have found some similarities?
Yes, I did, but I also want to be careful that I don't overstate it. But when you look at Johan's team, he does fit into the characteristics. Well, first of all the outsider CEOs had no experience being a CEO. Johan's team did also not have that. They don't present guidance. This is also something Teqnion does not do. The primary focus of the CEOs who are outsiders is on capital allocation. Well, this is definitely the case for Teqnion. Free cash flow, margins, and profitability are the key criteria they focus on. And to end this, they all have a long-term perspective. So there are some similarities, but I don't know if I'm going too far with this. What do you think, Kasim?
Yeah, the problem with frameworks like these is that you take the framework from the book as a reference point, I suppose, and then you start, looking at interviews and you start looking for things that match the framework of the outsider. It's a little bit of a confirmation bias sometimes, I suppose. Say a company doesn't give guidance. If you didn't read the book, you wouldn't necessarily think that's a good or a bad thing. But once you read the book, you would think that's a good thing. Well, it can also be a bad thing not giving guidance. It's dangerous to just assume that he's an outsider and then just assume Teqnion is a special business because you don't know. You haven't met him. You don't know what he does on a daily basis. There's a lot of unknown still.
Yes, I agree with you. One thing I have to note is that Teqnion they're still so small. It's very easy to be an outside CEO when you're that small. When you are 10 times as big, which only would mean a market cap of 3 billion, can you still be that outsider?
Yeah, being outsider is so difficult. Giving a label as an outsider is almost only possible after they've proven for, let's say, decades. I would say Steve Jobs was an outsider. I mean, he proved himself. We've talked about Dino Polska before and the founder. You could argue that the founder is an outsider, but at the same time, he hasn't proven he can do it for decades. Yeah, I don't know. Feels dangerous sometimes labeling somebody as an outsider, and then at the same time, it kind of helps prove your thesis for an investment. I don't know. Feels difficult.
I agree. But one thing I'm sure I'd rather have them comply with the principles than not comply.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Yeah, you can definitely use it as a reference point or a starting point.
Exactly.
You know what to look for in a CEO. It's not the holy grail. There are more things to look for, but it's definitely a good starting point.
When we look at Daniel Zhang, he's a big Berkshire fan. He went to the Omaha meeting in 2023 with Johan, and he dreamed of building his own Berkshire, and he landed at Teqnion via McKinsey and Bain & Company.
One of the management members is also a fan of Buffett. At the same time, who is not a fan of Buffett? But Daniel Zhang actually responded to our fundamental analysis as well, which was very cool.
Yes, that was great to hear. Very nice of him as well to just send us a response.
Yeah, he told us. First of all, he thanked us. Then he said, "We really did our homework well. We've put a lot of effort and soul into this, and I can feel that you've captured a lot of the important stuff." So that was so nice and cool of him to respond to our fundamental analysis. And you'd think this is nice. At the same time, Luke is always complaining, and Luke was like, "Why is the CEO or the acquisition CEO responding to our email? Doesn't he have anything better to do?"
Yeah, first of all, I'm very grateful. On the other hand, I couldn't help myself but thinking this. Yeah, I would say just spend your time on the acquisitions and do not. Yeah, maybe he should respond, but I hope he is really focused and not just telling a great story of liking Buffett, wanting to build your own Berkshire. He makes a lot of references value investors like to hear, but I am not 100% certain this is all
This is more of a. You're asking whether this is more of a wannabe Berkshire Hathaway type of style culture instead of just actually doing the work.
Yes, I'm not 100% certain, but you never are with the management team. But it's
Just,
weird because I don't have these doubts with management teams in general. So I should be just very happy they think this way. If they said nothing, I wouldn't even think this. And now it feels like I kind of blaming them. But I'm really it's really refreshing to see a management team like this.
Yeah, you're just being skeptical, which is always good. Not just believing everything you hear. So it's can be a good characteristic of your personality. We're getting a bit off track, I suppose. Just something fun to throw in there. That Daniel Zhang responded to our fundamental analyses. Just wanted to throw it in there. Can you give us a little bit of information about the incentives? Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. Give us the incentives of Teqnion.
Well, it's a little bit complex, so I hope I say it right, but the CEO gets 3% of a predetermined difference in profit from the past 3 years, and the rest of the employees get 0.6% of the same difference.
Yeah, so there's a difference between the profit this year and the profit from the past 3 years, and they get a percentage from that difference. It doesn't really matter how you calculate it. You just should know that in 2025, if things stay the same, he would get around 3 million Swedish crowns, which accounts for 300k US dollars.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, divided by 10. And the rest of the management team gets 0.6%.
Yeah, it's also good to know that if there's no profit, there won't be a bonus.
Yeah, in that way, it's quite simple and also quite fair, I guess.
Okay, let's touch a little bit on skin in the game and then move into the financials. Johan Steen owns 120 times his base salary, and Daniel owns 20 times his base salary, but his package of shares will increase over time. And I found out one thing that I don't really like, and that is that Teqnion has had 3 different CFOs in the past 3 years. This is, in my opinion, the biggest red flag there is with Teqnion.
Why do you find that a red flag?
Well, it's a very small company, relatively small company, that is publicly traded. So their finance have to be in order. Yeah, this might be an indication that there is something wrong with with their finances or with the pressure they might put on the CFO. It could be a coincidence, like someone just wants to leave, or they get a different job, or maybe they have other priorities. But I want to keep this in mind, and I watched all the Q&As from the past 3 years, I believe, and I think management takes this too light. In the Q&A, sometimes they kind of brush it off. I would like them to come up with a more clear explanation.
All right,
but maybe there is no clear explanation, and it's just that the CEO has a different priority, so it doesn't have to be a problem. But I would rather have them a CFO that stays longer. And even worse is that their solution now is they divided the position up to 2 people. Another structure where I think about, why would you do this? Just appoint a CFO and let them build some experience, or just hire an experienced CFO. It doesn't sit right with me.
And this is definitely something to keep in mind if you're interested in Teqnion. I would say let's head over to the financials of Teqnion.
Yes, good idea. Let's start with the 3 financial goals they set themselves. First goal is stability, so the debt ratio. They want to have a net debt EBITDA ratio under 2.5. Currently is 0.9, so that's very, very good, very healthy. Second goal is profitability. The EBITDA margin needs to be above 9%. Currently it's a little bit above 11%. So they also on track for this goal. And the last goal is one I already mentioned, shareholder value. They want to double their EPS every 5 years. They are also on track to do that. So when you look at the financials, it's looking good, even though last year was a tough year. But when you zoom out a little bit, Teqnion performs very well financially.
All right, that's interesting. How has the revenue over the past years developed? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, until this year, revenue grew very rapidly. Teqnion has a compounded annual growth rate of 28% in the last 10 years. And also when we look at net profit margins, they are very healthy with 8.5% on average over the past 3 years.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about probably one of the most important aspects of a serial acquirer, in this case, Teqnion, the capital allocation? What does it look like? What's your opinion on it? Is it any good? And what would you change if you had to change anything?
Well, right now I'm positive about the acquisitions they do. I think they're acquisitions that are in line with their strategy. Maybe they can be a little bit more aggressive, but it also depends on multiple factors, of course. More than their free cash flow is directed towards acquisitions, so that's good. One thing that is peculiar is that in 2022, a small dividend was paid under the pressure from a big shareholder called Fixar. Management hated this. They also spoke out about it. Daniel Zhang even said, if we can't find anything and have to pay out dividends, we should be fired. So they were not pleased with this, but they were forced to do so. Right now, I believe the shareholder does not have a big share anymore, so they don't have enough to say push a dividend through. But it was something weird that happened, and hopefully happened only once. But management said very clearly, we do not intend to pay out a dividend anytime soon. And to end on this, share buybacks are not possible because Teqnion is listed on the Nasdaq First North exchange, and the rules don't allow them to buy back shares. But I think if they could, they wouldn't do it at this moment either. They should be completely focused on acquiring new businesses.
And I think that's enough for the financials for now. Let's head on over to the risks and opportunities. Okay, you've done your research on Teqnion very well so far. Can you please start with the risks associated with Teqnion? And after we finish the risks, we'll head on over to the opportunities. And whichever you think outweighs the other will be very useful at the end.
Definitely. And I believe they both weigh very heavy. I think there are some serious risks, but on the other side, there are also some opportunities that are quite big. So the biggest risk I already mentioned, the changes in CFO over the past 3 years. This is something to look out for. One thing I really like about the management team on one hand is that they have a very informal culture. Sometimes I doubt they're already facing quite a lot of problems. So, for example, the house builders are not performing well. They make this a big problem themselves. So I still have doubts about the management team, about their capabilities to perform just as well when they are 10 times as big, for example. Then you don't have the time to worry about these relatively small problems. And it looks like they don't have the experience on board to handle, to be 10 times as big right now. That's logical, of course, but there's no one with experience doing that.
Yeah, the uncertainty definitely is a big risk. And
also, for me, the uncertainty in experience is also big, that once Teqnion grows, which I really hope, the acquisitions get bigger, more expensive, So growth is associated with risk and of course with opportunity. But then you have to have a management team that is really capable of handling this well.
Nothing to add there.
And just like I said, this is also the opportunity. There's so much room to grow. So many examples, especially from the Nordics, from successful serial acquirers. And when you look at Teqnion right now, until this day, they performed so well. They have a very high return on invested capital. A management team, one thing they definitely have is a long-term perspective. Of course, I have my doubts right now, but I definitely don't doubt their incentive currently. They're really focused on the long term. If Teqnion can become the next serial acquirer that keeps on growing for the next 10 years or maybe 20 years, they could be immensely successful, and that will go along with great returns for investors. But the risk, you should really realize there are risks involved.
It sounds like there are quite a few risks, but the few opportunities there are very big opportunities. Let's close the risks and opportunities and head on over to where it all comes together, valuing Teqnion AB. Well,
Yes.
Luke, take it away. Tell us how you valued Teqnion. How do you even value a serial acquirer, and what do we look out for?
Yes, I think there are too many businesses and they are too small to do a sum of the parts. It will come up with a very strange valuation. So we used quite a basic scenario analysis where we estimated the revenue growth for the upcoming 10 years. We set this growth on 15%. This should be doable if they continue on like this. Just like we just said, the risk will increase once they grow. But if you believe in Teqnion, you should account for a revenue growth of 15%. Otherwise, you shouldn't be in it. Then a free cash flow margin of 10% is reasonable. And I believe an exit multiple of 20 should also be very reasonable. And when this happens, you could look at a return of about 12% a year. If management performs well, the returns could be very attractive. But you heard the if in my sentence. It depends a lot on the capabilities of the management.
So the 15% is organic growth plus acquisitions?
Yes, but organic growth is it's very minimal. It's about, if you're lucky, 1, 2, or 3 percentage points, and all the growth will come from acquiring new companies.
All right, that's important to note. So when you're looking at Teqnion and you're analyzing the business, if they're not acquiring a single business in a year, you know it's trouble.
Yes, definitely. It's very important to keep an eye on if they are acquiring companies and what companies they are acquiring.
Yeah, and for many investors that don't know, a declining market is actually a lot more interesting for a serial acquirer. Am I right?
Yes, if you're financially healthy, that's definitely true.
Yeah, you can acquire companies at lower multiples, lower valuations. So this market we're currently in, which is, I mean, it's pretty high.
Exactly.
Some call it the AI bubble. It becomes more difficult to find attractive businesses. I mean, you can just acquire any company, but the returns will vary immensely based on the valuation you pay. So
yes,
it's definitely an interesting valuation. It doesn't scream cheap to me. There's still a lot of growth already priced in. 15% a year is not nothing. Definitely something to consider. Would you? You told us that Teqnion is in your portfolio, right?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
You've also been a bit skeptical about it. What's the main reason you still own it?
Well, currently, I think for me personally, it's worth the risk. I really see such a great potential if you are managed to hold Teqnion for the upcoming 10 years. The reward could be very big, but there's also a chance, I don't say they go bankrupt, but there's a chance you will be left with no returns.
So what would be your biggest red flag to sell Teqnion?
Even more trouble or more weird communication about CFO positions or another CFO leaving. I hope not, but once there are indicators that there is something wrong, of course it's already too late then, but I really keep an eye on their financial situation to see if nothing weird is going on.
Okay, let me try to summarize Teqnion, and please correct me if I'm mistaken. Teqnion is a serial acquirer that operates in niche markets. They buy companies that operate in unattractive businesses, such as Lux Electric Wheelchair.
Definitely.
They operate in a very small scale. The businesses usually generate between
250 million.
Teqnion's management, the company is still founder-led. The management is very capable, and it looks like they're doing a good job. It's also one of the potential reasons to sell the company.
Well, the management, their philosophy is, I would almost say, perfect, exactly what I'm looking for. But if they are capable, they still have to prove that, basically.
Yeah, exactly. The valuation doesn't scream buy me right now. It's not cheap. There's a lot of growth already priced in. But if the management executes their strategy correctly, it can be a very good compounder over time.
Yes, of course, I hope so.
And I hope so for you.
Yes. How do you think about Teqnion? Is it something you would consider?
I find that to be a difficult question. Maybe. I don't have an edge. I would have to rely on the management team for most of my thesis. I don't have an edge in the industrial space. I don't know whether their quality is good enough. I don't know whether the products are good or the services they provide are good. So I would have to base that solely on the management team. And based on what you just told me and based on our fundamental analysis, the management seems capable, just like you said, and they have almost a perfect strategy and philosophy, but they have to prove it. At the same time, there are a few mini red flags. I don't know. I find this one to be difficult, and when I am in doubt, I usually try to avoid it. So for now, I would say probably not.
Smart answer. I think it's sometimes better to be cautious, especially when you did not do the research yourself.
If the management was a big old yes, it was the best management team we've ever seen, and there are no red flags, maybe the business would be interesting, because that's what it's all about for a serial acquirer.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything you want to add before we end this audio analysis?
No, let's wrap this up. I still have a lot of work to do on my next research report, so after this recording, I will dive right into that.
Awesome. Well, Luke, it's been a lot of fun talking to you about Teqnion. It was a very interesting business, and I am looking forward to seeing you next week for our next one. If you never want to miss another fundamental analysis we do, we upload a new one every single week, year round. Head on over to thedutchinvestors.com and check it out over there. Hey, it's been a lot of fun, Luke. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks a lot. See you next week.